Well, 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 here he is, the ice cream man.
Yeah.
What have you got to tell me?
You job, you be perfect job because it's looking perfect now. No have any light, no have anything. Working perfect.
Oh, so we got no error messages flagged up on your dash?
Nothing.
Should we?
Before you have, after 10 days, every time changing you void, giving lights in front and screen. Now you don't have anything. Now your job's perfect. Thank you very much.
Well, hang on, the icing on the cake, we've got to check your oil level.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to go around there now. I'll get it. Can you reach it?
I think so.
This is going to be the interesting part. So, how many miles have you done? How many miles have you done since you've got this car back? Last week you'd done 2,000 miles approximately.
And this week, month 2,000.
So about 4,000 miles now.
Yeah.
Okay everybody, this is the big moment. Pull the dipstick out, give it a wipe first, make sure it's nice and clean. He's sat here for like a minute now, so the oil's had a chance to settle. Here goes. Look at that! Look at that shit! Woohoo! Excellent. See where that's sitting? If I can kind of show this. Where that's sitting, the level, the maximum mark is right where my fingernail is. And it's right on the maximum mark. So that is absolutely perfect. Before, if it had done like 4,000 miles, the oil level would be up here past this black bit. It would be way up here, but it's right back down here, sitting right on the maximum line. So yeah, well happy. This car has been like 12 months, a good 12 months since it started playing up, and now it's fixed. So brilliant. That is the best news I've heard, and it's a bloody Monday as well. Right, and he's a happy man. He hasn't got to keep getting out of his bloody car every 2 weeks. Fan-bloody-tastic. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Well, I think this calls for a little celebration. I suppose I better go and let Monica know the good news. Woohoo! Money! That car with the oil level rising is friggin' fixed! Back on good!
Well, whoop-de-doo. What do they call you again? A trigger? No, maybe it's flush. Or how about zippy?
Huh? Am I missing the joke here?
Well, it's only taken you a bloody year to fix it. Do you think that's a joke?
Okay, alright then. Two things. One, have you ever heard of slow and steady wins the race? And Molly, it's not my fault you're a millennial.
Shall we put that slow and steady to the test then? Let's go, she-bitch. Just as I thought. Too slow.
Okay. Yes, I have to admit, this saga has been going on now for little over a full year. But don't get me wrong, it's not like I've been looking at this car every single day. In fact, most of the times when this car has come into the garage, the oil level has been way over full. I've simply gave it an oil and filter change and let the driver go back on his way again, simply because I have not had the time to look at it. In fact, in the year that this car's been playing up, I've looked at it very little, but I have been thinking about it. It's always been on my mind. But anyway, what I was going to do today, rather than me bang on too much, I'm just going to tell you right here and now what I fitted onto this car which cured it totally. So, and then I will go into sort of like looking at the DPF, which I have the original DPF off this car still, and then I'll give you a bit of a backstory how it all happened. So, I fitted, well, we had a taxi that was in an accident. The insurance company wrote it off. So I took the engine out of it and fitted the engine into another taxi with a blown up engine. And of course I had a spare DPF, didn't I? A spare DPF with the 4 sensors, 2 HEGO sensors and 2 temperature sensors on it. I had this DPF sitting here and I thought to myself, right, my problem car is here. I've got a DPF there. Why don't I just change the whole goddamn DPF and put it on with sensors? And that's what I did. It was a bit of an arse ache, if you know what I mean, because you've got to drop the front subframe off the car to get the DPF off. Bit of a pain. The reason I'd done that is because I didn't want to disturb the sensors on my new DPF. Well, it weren't a new one, it's a second-hand one with about 300,000 miles on it, but as far as I know, it was perfectly fine. I didn't want to break any of the sensors. I thought if I just changed the whole assembly, so I went for it. I fitted the second-hand DPF, and then the car got sat in the yard for like 2-3 weeks, and then eventually the driver come back and got in it, went off for a couple of thousand miles. It was fine when he come back and I checked the oil. I said, go away for another 2,000 miles. He come back again, as you just saw in the beginning of this video. He's done like 4,000 miles now and the oil level is still clean and it hasn't risen at all. And I think, great, problem solved. Although the problem still remains, is it the DPF that was faulty itself, or is it one of them 4 sensors? I think it's one of the 4 sensors, but I'll come to that later. The problem at the minute is it's fixed, and that's all I care about. I think I've got another one of these cars with the same problem, because I had one in the other day with the oil level massively over full. So I've made a note of that one, and I'm going to come back to that one. But let me just explain to you another problem that I had with this car, which was a big deal really. You have to do around about 2,000 miles in order to sort of like see the oil level has risen. I had this car for a week that I drove it personally, and I'd done about 300 miles in it. The oil level never rose one little bit. It was a waste of time. That's why I had to get the driver to do his taxi work in it for a couple thousand miles. The problem is, every time the driver comes in, I have to get him out of the car, put him in a spare car, and then tinker with his car, do something to it, then get him out of the spare car, put him back in his car, and it was a bit of a ball ache for the driver. It was annoying for him, you know, keep messing him around. So that's why I changed the DPF with everything on it. I could have gone for 1 sensor at a time, but there again, can you imagine how long that would have taken? Yeah, I've changed 1 temperature sensor, go away for a few weeks and come back. No, that hasn't fixed it, I have to change another one. You see what I mean? It's a right pain, this job was. But anyway, now I know that it's either the DPF or the sensors that are on it, or one of the sensors, then if I get another one of these cars, then I will go for 1 sensor at a time. But anyway, what I'm going to do now, I'll show you the DPF that is in question, and I'll show you the sensors on it, and then I'll give you the backstory. Well, here it is, the offending diesel particulate filter. I'm just going to point out some things that are actually on this filter which could be of any kind of relevance here. There are 2 temperature sensors. One that comes off the exhaust manifold before it goes into the DPF, and the second temperature sensor is right in the middle of the DPF. There is a 3rd temperature sensor, but that's further down the exhaust. Now here's where it gets a little bit interesting. There are 2 HEGO sensors I guess you can call them lambda sensors. One is actually before the DPF and the other one is after the DPF. Both of these HEGO sensors have 5 wires on them. You know, in the past on your old lambda sensors, they would have like 4 wires. 2 of them would be for the heating element and the other 2 would be to give the ECU a reading of whether it's a weak or rich mixture. So yeah, these HEGO sensors don't just tell the engine ECU whether the engine is running rich or lean. These have a constant variable voltage going from this sensor to the ECU, literally telling the ECU what the mixture is running at all the time, much more accurately. And this is one of the reasons why the engine ECU is not only able to control the fueling of the diesel injectors to run the engine, but also to use the diesel injectors to clean the DPF. So apart from our HEGO sensors and temperature sensors, there's also a little pipe coming out the DPF. There's a rubber hose that goes onto this, which goes up to your DPF pressure sensor. That will measure your soot loading in the DPF, or it will measure the pressure in the DPF, and normally the pressure is determined by how much soot is in here. So the problem that I'm faced with is the actual DPF faulty, or is it one of these sensors? Now, I'm not 100% sure here, but what I am pretty confident, I do not think it is the DPF itself, because when I done a static regeneration on this particular car with this DPF on it, although the DPF soot level was fairly high, it was enough to throw up a code, but it wasn't enough soot level to put the car in forced limited power or even to bring the engine management light on. So to actually drive the car, despite the fact this had a fairly high soot level in it, it wasn't showing any symptoms to the driver. So, and after I'd done a static regeneration, the soot level in this DPF went right down to a very, very low amount, which tells me there can't be an actual blockage in the DPF. If there was a blockage in this DPF, then surely it would block up even more to the point where the car gets put into limited forced power. So I'm pretty confident it's not the actual body of this DPF. The filter inside here is okay. I believe it is one of these 4 sensors. You've got 2 temperature sensors and you've got these 2 HEGO sensors, and both these HEGO sensors are quite complicated, and the way they work with the engine ECU is pretty damn technical. But there are no engine codes thrown up in the ECU to do with the temperature sensors or the HEGO sensors, but that doesn't mean to say that one of these HEGO sensors is giving a false reading to the ECU, which could be the cause of why the soot level is getting high. And also, there's another thing I want to point out here. The engine oil required message kept flagging up on his instrument pack. Even if we got the car in, done an oil and filter change, and reset that message, it would flag up again within the space of a week. So something was triggering that. Generally, under the normal run of things, these cars' computer, they would kind of work like, if you've reset it, it will come on again, generally speaking, after a certain amount of distance travelled or time. But I mean, 4 or 5 days isn't a lot of time. So what was bringing that on, I don't really know. And I'm kind of thinking there is also another thing here. There is a probe that goes into the engine oil. And I believed it was a oil level sensor, but it could well be an oil quality sensor. It could be measuring the quality of the oil. I know they do have these things in some cars. So as the oil level, as diesel fuel is going into the oil, and this sensor is measuring the quality of the oil, that could be giving a reading to the engine ECU, and that could be what's bringing it on, because the diesel fuel is watering down the engine oil and deteriorating the engine oil. So it's just things that I've been thinking about. Apart from that, looking at this DPF, maybe it was something to do with these pressure sensor. I don't think so actually, but maybe these HEGO sensors were causing some kind of a problem. This is all I can really think. Something to do with these HEGO sensors, or one of these temperature sensors giving a false reading to the ECU, and it was causing the ECU to fuel these injectors as it's not supposed to be doing. The one thing I do know for sure, either this DPF or one of the sensors on this DPF was causing our problem. Just out of sheer interest here, as I said, trying to replace these temperature sensors on the car when the DPF is bolted at the back of the bloody engine is not an easy task. So just so you've got some kind of idea how difficult it is to actually get to these temperature sensors on this DPF. This car I'm doing a clutch on, and I have the subframe removed. So I've got plenty of room now. When the subframe's here, and also you've got the drive shaft here going into the gearbox, that gets in the way, and you've got limited room to get your hand up there. But with the subframe out of the way, there's our DPF, there's our number 2 lambda sensor, and there's our front temperature sensor. I can get to that one no problem. That one's the easy one. The hard one is the one up there. So I can get the spanner on it, but you're still struggling a bit, if you know what I mean. It's a bit tight up there. Because they're so tight as well, you've got to try and hit the spanner to shock it free. And if you can't, you're going to have to cut that metal bit off and put a single X socket on that to undo that, because they are pretty damn tight. So yeah, not the easiest of things to get to. And will they come undone? I'm about to find out. Do you know what? That is tight. God, oh flicking! Oh, it's gone. It's gone. Something went. Yes, it's undone. But do you know what? That was flipping tight. When this DPF is on the car, it's difficult to get to these sensors. This is the easier one of the two. The one that's actually in the main body, at the top of the main body of this DPF, is a lot harder to get to. But anyway, let me wind this one out first. There you go. There's one temperature probe. So what you need to remember is, on the car, you've got your DPF pressure hose coming up here, and you've got this sensor sitting at the top of the DPF, and you can't really see it because you're underneath the car. So you basically got to go by feel to get up to here to get your spanner on it in the first place. But anyway, let's see if it undoes. Oh my God! I really can't get enough push on it to actually get it moving. Hell's bells, it's not moving. I'll give it a tap, a whack. My God, do you know what? I'll give it a whack with the palm of my hand, and that's actually got it moving. So, but, you know, to be honest with you, it's a bit dodgy to say the least. I mean, sure, you could literally, you could snip the wire off, couldn't you? And you could put a socket on there, which would be better. If you rounded it off with a spanner, you'd probably have to use a single hexagon socket to get on there and fit a new sensor anyway. I guess if you do actually remove, or have to remove these sensors, the idea is you're going to put a brand new one in its place anyway. There. Oh! You see that the first one we took out was nice and was black. This one isn't. This one's a nice, like, grey colour. This is the Higo sensor, the first one, the one right up by the top of the engine. This should be the easiest one to get to. 22mm spanner size. Obviously, if you've got the right socket with the slot in it, so you can fit over here, would probably be a help. I'm going to have a go. This one should undo. It doesn't want to move. I'm going to have to whack the actual spanner. Nope, that's tight. Let me put it on the bench a bit in a more of a sturdy position so I can hit it a bit better. Right. Yeah, that's got it. Just needed a good little whack. There we go. It's coming out. This should be the easiest one to replace. Yeah, it's a bit on the black side. And last but least, number 2 Higo sensor. Can we undo this one? Give it a bit of a, yes. I'm actually amazed that's just come undone. There we go. Number 2 Higo sensor is as clean as a whistle. You could literally eat your flipping dinner off that. So that makes perfect sense now. The Higo sensor and the temperature sensor that are closest to the engine before the DPF filter are black, and yet the temperature sensor and the Higo sensor after the DPF filter are nice and clean, which shows that the DPF filter is being cleaned properly. That's obviously why the sensors are nice and clean. So there you go. Anyway, let me take you back in time to how this all began. And I'm going back to probably August 2021. The driver would come into the garage for an oil and water check. I would check his oil and it would be massively over the maximum. And my initial thoughts obviously were, mate, stop topping the oil up yourself. You don't know what you're doing, you're putting too much oil in it. And then he'd come out with, well, it's coming up with oil change required on the dash. And I'm saying, well, that is not an indication for you just to bung oil in the engine. So initially I'm blaming the driver, but it wasn't the driver. And then what I thought was, because I've never had this problem before, I initially thought it was the high pressure fuel pump leaking fuel from the pump into the camshaft area and running down into the sump. That's what I thought. And I was going to replace the high pressure fuel pump for another good unit that we had. Unfortunately, we never got to that point because the engine blew up. I can't remember why it blew up, but I'm pretty sure the crankshaft shells got knocked out. Something to do with the timing chain as well. Considering this engine has done a lot of mileage. I have a worksheet here. This is the sheets we write out whenever we fix a taxi and do some work to it. This is September the 29th, 2021. The car had done 294,000 miles and the engine took a dump. It blew up. So we managed to get hold of another good used engine with pretty low mileage on it. I believe the engine we got had little over 10,000 miles on it. It was out of a Mondeo that had been burnt out, but the mileage was so low and it was a really good price. And this engine, it came with everything on it. It came with the injectors, the high pressure pump, the entire wiring harness, everything. Apart from obviously the DPF. Surprise, surprise. So I fitted the engine in this car and run it up, drove it around, everything was fine. And you know what? I forgot about it. I just give it back to the driver, he went off, and that was it. Didn't even think about oil level rising anymore. And it was only some weeks later that when the driver come in, we noticed the oil level was over the maximum. And we're sort of like, oh dear, now we have got a bit of a problem. And it's sort of like once a month, I'd have to change the engine oil and filter because I couldn't let the guy drive around. Something serious is going to, if the oil level gets too high in the engine, either the engine's going to sort of like take off and run on its own engine oil, or it's going to bend a con rod, or something seriously is going to go wrong with it. So we've had to do a number of oil changes on it to keep it on the road. And in the meantime, I've been kind of thinking, what could be wrong? What can I do to try and resolve this issue? Well, I've looked on the internet and I haven't really found any kind of information. But the next stage is what I'd done to it. There was a particular day I got this car in and I thought, right, I'm going to have a look at it. I connected the scanner up to it, read the codes in the ECU, and I noted that the soot accumulation in the DPF was pretty high, because it was throwing up a code in the ECU. However, the soot accumulation had not brought the engine management light on, and it hadn't put the car into forced limited power. So to actually get in the car and drive it around, you would think there was nothing wrong with it. The only thing that was chiming up regularly was engine oil required on the dashboard. And I'll come to that in a minute. So I thought, right, I know what I'm going to do. I checked on my scanner, all the live data and everything. I couldn't see nothing wrong. So I thought, I'm going to do a static regeneration on this car and see what I can see. So I decided to do that. I started doing the regen, and as the regen progressed, the soot level went up and up and up and up and kept getting higher, to the point where, as it was regenning, the engine management light came on, then the spanner light came on, and it's like flipping heck. And the temperature of the engine got to like just over 100 degrees, the coolant, and at that point I thought, stuff this, and I abandoned the regen. I didn't realise that the cooling fan comes on at 103 degrees when you're doing a regen on these cars. But when I do a regen, I like to have the aircon running at the same time. That way I know the cooling fan's working. So anyway, what I'd done was, I abandoned the regen and I thought, what the hell, I need to sort the cooling fan out. I thought there might be a problem with the cooling fan. So I went round to the front bumper and I noticed that the grille shutter mechanism in front of your radiator, it was all closed. And I thought, that's a bit odd, shouldn't they be open? And I sort of looked at them, messed around with them, and they were all shut, solid, so there's no air going through the radiator. So I took the front bumper off, I took the motor off the main slat that the motor operates to turn all these slats. And then I opened the slats from the closed position, put the motor back on, and funnily enough, the grille shutter mechanism all started to work after that. And secondly, the aircon started working. The aircon wasn't working either. That started working, and the cooling fans all started working when I put the aircon on. So I thought, okay. At that point, I actually thought I'd done some good. I thought I was onto a winner. So I decided to do another regen. So I got the old car doing another static regen, and this time, the slats opened, the cooling fans were working, and the soot accumulation started to come down. I had to do a regen anyway, because it was in forced limited power by now, because the soot accumulation was too high. But as the regen progressed, the soot accumulation came down and down and down to quite a low level. To the kind of low level you would think, well, the DPF is not blocked. Because at a certain level, it's like, it's pretty clean. And this DPF was pretty clean by this point. So I thought, yeah, that's it. I reckon I'd fixed it. And I was really confident. I was kind of like, yeah, I've got rid of the soot in the DPF. Everything's working, the fans are working, everything seems great. Maybe it was that grille shutter mechanism stuck shut that was causing this problem. I don't know, but I thought it probably was. But obviously I let the car go out again. He came back a few weeks later, and surprise, surprise, the oil level was still miles over the maximum. And I thought, shit. I really thought I'd got it corked that time, but no. So the next thing come along, I'm kind of scratching my head, what the hell am I going to do with this car? We had a second-hand ECU, and on second-hand ECUs, you can swap on these cars if you get the right ECU. So I got this second-hand ECU, I took it down to our local Ford garage, got them to program this second-hand ECU, so I thought maybe there's something wrong with the software in the ECU. And it's all like a quick job for them to do anyway. So we tried that. That didn't cure it. And that was about as much as I'd done to this car. And at that point, it was like, I've got that spare DPF there now. This is what I need to do. Because it's just the time this has gone on for, it was so long. And it's like I had to do something. I couldn't just sort of like leave this car and give up on it. So I put that DPF on it, and that obviously cured it. But the other thing I was going to say was, in conjunction with the oil level rising, constantly, as you heard the driver say, I mean, I thought it was every like 4 to 5 days, but he's saying it's around about every 10 days, the oil change required will bing up on the dash. And I'm kind of thinking, well, what the hell is bringing that on? And I'm looking on the internet, and I'm thinking, do these Mark 5 Mondeos have an oil quality sensor in their sump? Because I'm thinking, how the hell does the fuel computer know that the engine oil is deteriorated? How the hell does it know that? I mean, most cars will work on time, distance travelled, driving styles and that. And some cars have an oil quality sensor. And I know that these cars have an oil level sensor. But when I looked into it, all these Mark 5 Mondeos do have is an oil level sensor. That's all it is. But I did find out that they do this, they work this calculation out, obviously through time, distance travelled, different driving styles, the way this algorithm works, and also, wait for it, DPF performance. So what I'm saying is, if the DPF is getting to the soot levels where it's getting close to being blocked, that is sending messages to the ECU computer, algorithms or however it works, to affect the oil change required interval. And that's what it is. That's why the oil change required kept flashing up on the dash every 10 odd days or so. So that kind of makes sense now. But anyway, the problem is solved for the time being. I'm still a little bit annoyed because I would have rather liked to have said, that is the sensor, that was the problem, that was the one item that's causing all the issues. But I can't tell you that because I obviously changed the whole lot, simply to make life easier. But if I get another one of these cars, I will try to do one sensor at a time to start with. It's because the trouble is I don't want to mess the drivers about too much. I need to get the jobs fixed, and that's the problem. I wish I knew the exact spot on answer, but I don't. So what I would say to you is, if you have this problem, and this is a pretty rare problem on these Mark 5s, I must say, if you do have this problem, if you can get hold of a second-hand DPF with everything on it that's good still, it might be worth just changing the flipping lot and being done with it. Because if it's your own personal car and you don't do that much mileage, then how the hell does this work? How long is it going to take for you to change one sensor and then drive around about 2,000 miles to actually get the oil level to rise? This is the problem. It's so much time and mileage spent trying to actually get the problem to occur. But anyway, now you know what fixed it on the car we have here. So it's just like the end of an ongoing situation. I'm glad it's over, but now I know it's actually DPF related. So if I get another one, I will try to be a bit more specific and try and find out exactly what sensor it is. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. I hope this might help somebody. You never know. I know it's a bit of a rare old problem, but anyway, I'm just glad this one's done. So anyway, I'm going to out of here. See you in the next one. Thanks for watching everybody. Have a good one. Adios.